5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're live. This is the design of everyday people. Hello. Welcome to this event. Whenever you are, wherever you are, thanks for joining the design of everyday people. Let me just mute all the other channels where I'm streaming this, where I talk to designers from all over the world and where you get to literally ask them anything. So stick around till the end to get your questions answered. But let's start this session by making it as interactive as possible. Drop an emoji or the name of your city, the name of your country, wherever you're tuning in from. And hopefully we're just not speaking into the void of the internet. So let me know where you're listening to this conversation from. For this event, we have partnered with Lyssna. Lyssna is your go-to research platform. The best teams use Lyssna, companies like Miro, Asana, and Figma, to deeply understand their audience and to move in the right direction fast. Lyssna offers tools for moderated interviews, unmoderated tests, surveys, recordings, and my favorite feature is Recruitment, finding your target users without leaving the office. And if you're like me, without leaving home. They even have a template library to help you set up user tests in seconds. It's literally all your research tools in one place. And guess what? As I've partnered with Lyssna, they have kindly offered the audience watching today $20 credit off your next test. So you can use the code InsideLook20 and scan this QR code and get $20 credit on your first test. And it's only available for the first 100 users. So if you're keen to try out Lyssna, no risk and also free test credit, I think this is the perfect chance. So scan the QR code shown on the screen, or I'll leave this QR code throughout the event. So if you feel inclined, please scan that. And I would also drop a link in the chat when I can as well. All right. So for folks who are tuning in on their phone, then you can just kind of click on that stream of consciousness we call chat, and you can scan this. It won't let me paste this comment. 1 second. Okay, here we go. All right. Again, first 100 users only. So if you're keen to get $20 credit, then you should scan that. Okay, now let's get back to the show. And we've already had folks come in to say where they're tuning in from. We have, hey, how's it going, Tristan? And we have a LinkedIn user from Seattle. Perfect. Okay. So today's topic is this inside look, where we'll be diving into a designer's guide to research across the product cycle. Okay. And we have a special guest from Lyssna. But first, let me start with just quick introductions. I'll go first here. I'm Chris, the founder of UX Playbook, but before that, a self-taught designer struggling to get into UX. And now I spend most of my time helping designers navigate a fuzzy UX career with UX Playbook, from building your first portfolio to leading your first design team. But that's actually enough about me. I won't bore you. If it's your 50th time here, you probably know that already. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Miller, currently a product design manager, or the product design manager at Lyssna, a facilitator and coach. And before we were on air, the co-founder of Cam1, his new side hustle startup, which is pretty cool. But let's get him out here and find out more about Andrew. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I am good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Really excited for this conversation. But let's, for the audience, for the people that don't know you, why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself?
Cool, totally. So you might hear my Kiwi accent coming through today. So I'm based in Wellington, New Zealand. I am, what am I? I'm a dad, first and foremost, a dad of a nearly 3-year-old boy, so that keeps me busy enough. I love my sports. I love football, soccer in particular. Bit of DIY around the house as well when I can. And obviously, yeah, I'm a designer by trade. And so I've just hit my 1-year mark at Lyssna. And so been really enjoying that journey that we're on so far.
That's awesome. And someone said, I love this. It's a plant off. I think Andrew wins with his background. Okay. Yeah, I mean, hit your 1-year mark at Listener. So I guess before we start the conversation of, research within product lifecycle, just give us a brief walkthrough of your journey as a designer and really how you ended up at Listener.
Cool. Yeah, I guess let's go all the way back. I mean, I guess I've always been a maker at heart. I think even when I was like quite young, I was building little stop motion videos with my toys. Didn't really know what I was doing, but making things. And then as I got a little bit older, I was skinning HTML websites during my high school years. And so I guess I just thought that's what everyone did. Everyone was making things and doing that kind of stuff. So I initially actually started studying something differently at university, and then quite quickly was nudged towards the direction of design, being like, hey, you can do that for a living. And I was like, oh, I just thought that's what people do. I mean, in their spare time, not their full-time gigs. So I studied here in Wellington at Victoria University, and I was really lucky at the end of that study to land an internship at a company that built software for like big hardware providers, so like HP, Dell, Sony, basically people who are trying to produce new tech that they wanted software to kind of sell it. So it's like, oh, we've got a new, back in the day, it was kind of like a motion camera that you can play games with, like, or different like big screen tablets that at the time was kind of new. And so they were looking for someone like the company I worked for to help build software to really sell those new features, which is actually really cool when you're a new fresh-faced kid out of uni and just like looking to, stretch all your muscles and work on some games here and work on some, other things here. So that was really cool. And then after that, I moved into another agency based in Wellington. So an app agency called Paperkite. And so we really specialized in mobile apps. It was 2013. And I guess like at that point, the app world was really starting to pop off. It was not only did people start having smartphones, but everyone was like, oh, I can do things with my phone. I can put my content on there. And it became a real new platform. And so it was a really cool space to play in at that time. And when I joined, it was very much a small team. It was like me and 5 other people. And I stayed there for 8 years, and we kind of grew and grew. And so like the team grew and I got to grow as part of that journey. And obviously the types of products and clients we had got bigger and better as well. So had the opportunity to work with clients like Coca-Cola and BP and the All Blacks, which is New Zealand's national rugby team. Not that I'm a massive rugby fan, but you've got to stay patriotic, I guess. But that was really cool. And then, I guess post that, the last few years, I've been in the product and SaaS world. And so I've been pretty lucky to get to be, playing a bunch of different roles. So I've been the solo designer in places. I've been the head of design. I've been at the sort of leadership director level as well. And so I guess that's given me lots of cool experiences that I can use. And so, that's brought me here to Lyssna, where I've been, like I said, here for about a year now. It's been super fun. And the team's just great to work with. Like, I think I'm really privileged that I get to work with a team of people who are like really motivated by the mission. And like, we're building a product for designers and researchers like myself, which is like, you don't always get to do. So it's really cool. And it's like, everyone's really motivated to build a great product. And so, I guess that's, to answer your question, that's kind of where I've got to. That's how I've got here, I guess.
Yeah, amazing. So before we jump right into it, I do want to remind the audience that as we're talking about this subject of research across the product lifecycle, that if they do have any questions, just drop it in the comments and we'll get to them. Like instead of waiting for us, that segment of this show, drop them in the comments so it gets out of your brain onto paper. And if we have time, we will address those questions and we'll try to get through as many as we can. So with that said, let's jump straight into it. So today we're talking about a designer's guide to research across the product lifecycle. So let's start with this question. Where does research fit in the product lifecycle? Or said differently, how does research fit in this product lifecycle? What's sort of your experience and your experience around this topic, Andrew?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I guess for me, in the UX space, the user's key, right? Like, so we want to hear as much of the user's voice as we can. And so actually just thinking about my career today, I actually look back at a little bit of shame being like, man, some of those early years, I didn't do any research at all. And it's so like, I can't believe it, but we live and we learn. So to answer your question, I guess research can fit into, almost every single part of the process. And I can maybe high level go through that. But I guess the thing for me is there's lots of frameworks out there that talk to, the product, design, process. And I'll often just refer back to the double diamond. It's something I've always kind of gravitated towards, but you can speak to any framework that makes sense to you. But for me, I often think about, I guess, the first diamond space is like the problem opportunity. So it's like, what are you trying to do? Like, what's the problem you're trying to solve or opportunity? And you really want to understand that as much as you can, right? And so that often starts, research is really key in that moment, right? Whether that's, doing market research through surveys, talking to people, it's critical. So like user interviews. So maybe that's with potential customers or existing customers. If you're building something brand new, you might want to talk to them like, how do you currently, solve this problem? And how might this potential product help you do that, better in the future? And I guess other things you might do at that early stage is like competitor analysis. So, we might not be the only people in this space. So how are other people doing that? You can do that through surveys. Another way you can do that is literally like testing their product. So we at Lyssna actually have a live website testing product that we've just built recently. That's actually a really cool way to do that. You can get other people to look at your competitors' sites and give you feedback on that and see what's working and not working so well. So you can, use that to inform, what you build next. So that's kind of that early stage. I guess other things to consider is like, you might want to do card sorting or tree testing to kind of understand how people think before you get even into the, designing, pixels or wireframes. It's like, actually, how do people understand concepts? How do they group things? How do they navigate, information architecture before you're even, designing, I guess UI or actual solutions. So I guess there's that part. And then for me, once you've understood that problem space really well and you're solving the right thing, then you move on to that kind of deliver solution. So like, what are we going to build here? Like, what's the best solution for this particular problem? And so there's so many moments in the process here, but I guess early stage, you want to get feedback, as early and as often as you can. So a good way to do that is running like a preference test. So you might be like, okay, option 1 or option 2. And so spinning up a little test where you're like getting people's feedback on like, is A going to be better than B? You can do that pretty quickly and get results, and it can help you steer you one way or another. And the other big one, I guess, is prototype testing. So whether that's through, like a full UI mockup, whether that's even at a wireframe stage, like here is a flow that we think is going to solve the problem. Let's test it with people. And so I guess back in the day, we would mock something up and stand on the street and go, hey, I'll buy you a coffee if you, if you tap these buttons and tell me what you think. But nowadays you can kind of do that all online, which is pretty amazing. And so I think that's a key one for designers, right? It's like, here's the design, go away and test that prototype before you, go and invest a bunch of money to build it. And I guess the other part for me is like throughout this is the moderated interview side. So whether that's, like I said, the example, putting something in front of someone and then getting their feedback, getting more, I guess, qualitative feedback. So interviews is a big part. So whether that's early wireframe stage or really close to the end of, a fully designed mock-up, talking to customers the whole way through is key for me. So yeah, I guess one other thing to note is I think quite often we think about the process, we think about it in terms of like that start point and then the designs are finished and now it's going to go into the build phase. But I think the key thing for me is post-launch, there's still so much you can learn. It's actually when you probably learn the most. It's like, it's now live, and no matter what someone on the side of the street or, someone tells you, through a test, it's not really until it gets into the hands of people that you're going to get true information about how it's really being used. Are they really going to spend money with you now? And so you need to lean on, things like analytics tools that you've got. But like I said before, live website testing is another way you can do that. So once you've spun up your product, go away and don't forget to keep testing it and learning from it, because that's how you're going to keep improving as you go as a designer. And I guess one last thing before I stop blabbling. I've said a lot of things here, and I think the key for me is that it's not one size fits all. Like every project is different, and that might mean you've got less budget or less time, or maybe you've got a lot of information when you're starting already. Like maybe there's already a big piece of research that's been done, or other data that helps you inform your decision making. And so you don't need to do it all. You don't need to be stopping at every single moment. You don't need to feel guilty for it. I think sometimes as designers, especially me early in my career, I went from doing nothing to being like, oh man, if I don't do it at every stage, am I doing the right thing? I think it's just about finding the right amount of research to help you move forward. And it doesn't need to be big time consuming things. You can run pretty small tests pretty quickly and get information to help you inform your decision making. So I guess that's the key thing to remember. Like, just because I'm saying all these things doesn't mean you need to go away and be like, I need to do every single one of those types of tests all the way through.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think I was the same early in my career. I was like, oh, there's so many types of tests. Like, if we don't do all of them, then how do I know what I'm doing? And over time in your career and over time spent working on a specific problem space and an industry, you kind of build up like intuition and experience. So you're like, okay, maybe I can make some bets here. And then, when it's live, are my hypothesis or assumptions correct without spending so much time on actually building the goddamn thing, right? So what and I'm a big proponent of that. I think like as you said, Andrew, once we get things in the hand of users, once they can actually use it, is like the richest sort of form of insight and data, because it's now in the wild. Simulated test environments work to an extent, but it's always like controlled. Similar to scientists, how they test in a lab. It's like, okay, if it doesn't work in the lab, it won't work in real life, but it doesn't guarantee work in real life, right? And they call it what, in situ, like in situation testing. And that for me has worked so much better. So I kind of err towards that side of like, and that's why I really like the live website testing. It's like, hey, it's live now. Like, what's broken?
Yeah.
Tell me now. So that's really good.
I think you're right, and I think you can learn a lot about, like, through that early research. You can definitely save a lot of time and money not building the wrong thing. So you can learn a lot of what not to do as well. So I think it's still critical that you do, keep those customers as part of the conversation throughout, the design phase. But like you said, like once it's live as well, that's when you get more information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So how does this work with Lyssna, inside Lyssna? How do you guys approach this?
Yeah, I guess the great thing about working for a small team is, like, everyone's pretty empowered to run research as part of their process. That's not necessarily just the designers. We've got our product team, our product management team, and a bunch of people who are running tests throughout. So it's really pretty quick and easy to spin up a test as well. Actually, maybe this is the time I could actually show you how we do it within Lyssna.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, okay.
My screen.
Yep. Let's.
Cool. Yeah, so this is like our Lyssna dashboard here, and so yeah, I guess like I said, it's pretty quick to spin up a test. You can go up here and create a study. You can run an interview. So if you want to help, have a proper one-to-one conversation with someone, you can do that. And we also have a massive template library, which I think I'll use today, because the great thing about templates, as you mentioned earlier, is like sometimes I think you don't know where to start, or it's a little bit intimidating writing research questions. You're like, well, I don't know, is this a leading question, or how many questions should I ask? And so I guess the great thing about our template library is we have all these different scenarios that you can at least use as a starting point. And so for this one, we'll pick this test desirability and design preferences, which we'll get going now. So yeah, for us, quite often we're running really discrete tests. You can do huge studies. You can build, like, so within this is our builder here. So you can actually build studies that combine a bunch of different methodologies all in one test, which a lot of customers do. I actually really like running quite discrete little studies as well, where you get to just focus in on one particular problem and see if you can, how much you can learn in that space. So this thing is loading a little bit, but I guess I'll give you an overview while it's doing that. So yeah, within the builder, you can add these, I guess, section blocks like I mentioned. So we've got all these different test types: prototype testing, 5-second test. So it's like you show someone an image and then get to see what sticks after 5 seconds of looking at it, and a bunch of other things. So we've mentioned a few of these things here, like live website testing. I'm just going to give this thing a little refresh because it is not showing some images. There we go. So yeah, a preference test is a really good example of what I think is a way to run a quick study, because you might have two concepts that you want to test. So option one looks like this. It's a nice little mock-up of a medical app. And then option two, same concept, but different design. And so you might have an instinct as a designer as which one is going to work best, but why don't we test it, right? And so you can spin that up. You can add some follow-up questions as well. And so you can add as many or as few as you like. In this scenario, we've added, getting people to give feedback on what they like about their selected concept. And you can also add other questions like which design did you like, why did you choose the design you selected? All these kind of things. And so I guess this is just building a test that you can then, send to real people. Then if I hit the save and preview, hopefully that comes through. Yeah, I think it is. You can also see what it's going to look like in the hands of a participant. So yeah, you'll send this out to the people, and then they'll get shown these two designs side by side, and then they can look at them in detail themselves and go, yeah, I prefer this one, and they'll hit I choose this one, and then the follow-up questions will show up as well. So it's really pretty straightforward to set up and spin. And the other really cool part for me is when you head over to this recruitment area. So you can just set up with a link. So that's actually what I did like predominantly before I joined Lyssna, was I would recruit using my own audience. So you set up a link and share that link out to existing customers or anyone you've recruited. But actually this panel that we have is pretty amazing. So the cool thing about our panel is, like, say it's really hard to find customers to speak to, or say it just often, I found it takes a lot of time to get people to respond to these things. The cool thing about our panel is it's really fast. And so you can specify however many people you want to talk to. So whether that's 250 or 25, whereabouts they live, like which country. And there's a bunch of other demographics you can specify here. So it could be, like the average household income, or what do they do for a job. Basically, what you want to do is try and identify as close to the type of ideal customer or ideal user you want for whatever you're designing. And so you can specify all these things, and then once you're ready, you just hit submit order. And honestly, like, I kid you not, the first time I did this, it was like magic. Like, I hit that button, I got up, got a drink, came back, and I already had results. Like, it's so fast, and it's actually like this little hit that you get as a designer, where you've spun up a test, and then all of a sudden you're seeing results like firsthand. It's really cool. And so I'm not going to place that order now, but what I have done is prepared one in advance to show you. So yeah, like I said, here's an example where I've spun up a test with 25 people. And yeah, quite quickly you can see option one's performing better than option two. And that's like giving me pretty good confidence that we can continue that way and not necessarily have to continue, bouncing between, is it option one or two? And maybe that, senior stakeholders really strong on option two. Well, now we've got some, information to back up that option one is the way to go. So even sometimes you might, as a designer, I think, have a strong inclination as to which way it should go. Sometimes just having this type of data really just backs you up, and it takes it away from being an opinion and then more into numbers, which I think people can get behind, and it's harder to kind of debate. And so, yeah, this is our overview of our results page, and you can see lots of people mentioned that they preferred the design that was clean and simplistic and friendly. And then also down below here, we had an open question, which is like, why did you prefer the design you selected? And what I've done before this is I've gone through and tagged them. So any themes that I felt made sense to kind of categorize together, I've added as a tag. And so these top two mentioned how easy it was to understand. And so what you can then do as well is, look at your tags in a chart as well. So again, it's just another way to create a slice of information that you can use to inform your decision making. So it's like, cool, people like this one because of whatever factors there are. It could be the iconography, or it could be whatever they put there. So yeah, that's a really high level view of our builder and our results. And so yeah, I guess this is the way we are running studies internally at Lyssna, and it doesn't, like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be a big complex thing. It can actually be pretty quick, and you can get results, relatively quickly, and make decisions, within the space of an hour or two, right?
Yeah, and does everybody designers, and well, not just designers, but does everybody at Listener sort of use Listener to test things? And have you
Mm,
found like that kind of useful in terms of like um aligning with certain
totally.
goals, or at least getting some insights? Like, how have you found that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, I'm a big believer in, like, we're building a product that we can use ourselves, so why wouldn't we? So yeah, whether that's like often people are just spinning up basic surveys, so like, just question surveys where there's not necessarily a design element. But again, that's all about using the tool, like, and the whole team's using it. So whether that's someone in, customer support or on the sales team or what have you, we're all using it. And I guess that's just like a way for us to all live and breathe our product, and like then we pick up little things that we want to improve, and it just gives us that motivation with whether that's like a small little fix that an engineer can pick up and go, oh yeah, I think we should do this because I use the tool myself. I think it's the kind of beauty of the space we play in.
Yeah, and I can vouch for the recruitment feature. It is so quick. Like, is literally like a couple of hours, not even a couple of hours. Sometimes it could be less, and you're like, whoa! Like, results start flying in, depending on
Mm,
what time zone you are as well, and where you're kind of recruiting. Sometimes I'm doing US, and that's a very different time zone to where I am, so I have to wait a little bit. But when it's local, it's so quick. I had some questions that come up that are
mm,
on topic, so let me just flash them on the screen. Um, what is the response rate like from your own recruitment panel?
mm. Yeah, I think we got a pretty good, like, I don't have the numbers at hand, so I'm happy to follow up with that one. But we have a pretty, like, our numbers are pretty good. And I guess one of the great things about our panel as well is if you get a response that you're not super happy with, or you feel like, oh, maybe this person hasn't understood the question right, then you can, like, no questions asked, kind of hit a button and say, hey, this one doesn't look quite right, and we'll replace that for free. Which I think is pretty cool. So there's not like any risk there of like getting, paying for 50 participants, they're only getting 40 useful responses. So yeah, I haven't got the numbers at hand, but I think that backup, knowing that's there, just kind of takes away any of that worry for me anyway.
Yeah, and the fact that you can kind of like um, think about the demographics like when you're recruiting, and then also
Mm,
have a screener which then says like, oh, if they don't fit in, they're kind of they're just not going to be eligible for the test, right? So I think that helps as well
yeah.
with kind of refining who is actually going to answer the survey or go through the test. And yeah, from just my experience of testing Listener, I mean, the response rate has been great. I've always got what I needed from it. There's another question from Conrad as well. He says, can you download results as
Mm.
CSV files?
Good question. Yeah, we can. So you can export things, to CSV, and that's pretty, like, all the responses in a raw format. So a lot of our customers like to do that if they want to go away and cut it and slice it in different ways, because I think quite often as researchers, there's particular ways that people want to look at information. They might want to, like, I guess one thing I didn't highlight before was you can filter in those responses as well. So you can kind of go, just show me everyone who's from this area or this age or answered this question. So you can say, if everyone who answered, this way for this question, filter all responses by that. And then it helps you get a view as to, if there's any other themes that way. But yeah, to answer the question, you totally can export to CSV, and lots of people do that, and they might take it into like another board. And we actually are working on other ways at the moment to think about how we can help people like export their visualizations outside of Listener, because quite often that's a really common thing that people do as well. Like, they might be quite happy with, like, this chart is showing me, like I said, like 75% option A, and so people are kind of screenshotting that or sharing that. So we're looking at ways right now to make that easier and nicer, so that people can throw those straight into presentations.
Nice. Excited for that. Okay. I mean, you did at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned a bunch of sort of options for testing. So I guess that I wanted to ask, Do you have any like go-to methodologies that you use personally or the team uses a lot? Like, yeah, do you have any of those that you would like to share?
Yeah. I guess I'm a big qual guy. So what I mean by that is like I like running interviews. I like doing surveys. Like I feel like I just like getting that more depth of understanding. And so yeah, I'm a big interviews guy. But I guess also the good thing is with like that preference test I showed just before, you can combine, qual and quant. So you can run like hey, is it option A or option B? You can get a chart that shows you that, but also you can run some follow-up questions. So I'm very big on that. But I guess as well as the preference test that I showed, there's probably two that come to mind. And again, maybe it's a good time to screen share because I've prepared a couple of examples. So yeah, I guess the two that I think of are prototype testing and live website testing, which is, like I said, relatively new. So with prototype testing, it's I'll just show things through this template library, but it's one of those things where you just can integrate with a Figma prototype that you've built, and it's pretty seamless. So I'm just going to find an example here. Let's pick this one. And so yeah, once you've built a little prototype, and like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be a fully designed mockup. It can actually be pretty high level wireframey, but I think it's a really good way to get people testing whether or not they can perform a particular task. So you might have 5 or 6 screens, and you want to see if they can perform a task. Can they get to whatever task you're assigning them? Like for example, in this template here, we've got use the prototype to subscribe to our pro plan. So we'll probably be showing a homepage and then asking people to navigate through and click. And obviously, if you're familiar with Figma, you can build pretty complex prototypes in there. You can also build pretty simple things in there where you just wire up a couple of interactive buttons here or there. But that's really like a really good way to just, again, I've got some results of an example over here where we've done something like this. So here's a prototype test where we've asked people to see if they can add red capsicums or red peppers if people are from the States. Can they add them to the cart and complete the purchase? And so, yeah, you can quite quickly see that 85% of all participants were able to perform that task. And so I think that's a really good way to test flow and I guess overall like UX, because quite often you're thinking about like, what does it look like? But actually the key thing is really like, does it work? Can people perform these key tasks? And so a prototype test for me is a go-to when it comes to doing that. And then there's a bunch more you can see here. You can see where people, the kind of key paths people took, where they fell off. So if you want to dive into that, you can look at every single, so this study had 20 participants and you can go through every individual path if you want to and see which way they went. Something else that we added relatively recently at the end of last year was recordings. And so you can actually, if you want to, you can record their screen, record their camera as well, or their microphone, their audio feed. And that's actually that's like, again, another way to combine that quant and qual. Like you get so much insights from watching particular participants. And you might find that you go, oh, this person up here did something interesting, but it doesn't really come through in just the kind of the numbers. But I can dig in and find the corresponding recording and watch that. I'm not gonna I don't think the audio will probably come through, but yeah, you can see. But you can see them clicking through, and I'm intentionally not showing their faces on this one because I don't want to expose that. But yeah, you get to see, you can hear them, you can see them, and you can see that we asked those participants to think aloud as well, so they're not just like clicking; they're actually speaking to like what they're seeing and all that kind of stuff. So that's a really powerful way to like get insight into flows you're building. And I guess the other one I mentioned is live website testing, which builds off the back of recordings. And so this is a live website test where again, I've just used a template here as an example, but we've sent people to the target homepage and we've asked them to find information on how to return an online order. And so this is a live site. Like we haven't prototyped anything. We've just gone target.com homepage, and when they open the test, they just get presented with that homepage, and then a little window pops up, which you can kind of make out over here on the left. They have this little kind of instruction menu, which shows the live site and the instructions that they have to do. And that's a really powerful way to see how they're using your real life product, or like I mentioned earlier, or a competitor. Like you might want to be like, how are people currently doing this with, insert competitor here. And I think, that's really powerful. And you can, like I said, you can combine it with follow-up questions. And so this one here, for example, said like, was the information where you're expected to find it? And 70% of people said no. So that's pretty amazing. That it's like, we built this thing, or this site's live, and yet 70% of people don't think the info was easy to find or where it should be. So that's pretty cool. And I guess one other thing I'll mention is like, you can, I think I said it before, but you can combine all these different test types into one big test. So you might want to be like, you might want to do a discrete thing where it's just a live website test, or it's just a prototype or a preference or whatever. But you can put all those things together, so you can run those things back to back. So sometimes what I like to do is, start with like a really high level concept and just get their take on it, and then you can kind of dive into it more and more. So you can kind of get there, like not introduce too many concepts at once, and then slowly introduce a prototype or introduce a preference test or whatever it is, and kind of get that real big picture as well. So yeah, those are my go-tos lately anyway.
Nice. Let me go back to this. Okay. Yeah, I really like the example you gave with the target. Like, can you find this information? No. So therefore, huge opportunity, right? And maybe that's on purpose because they don't want people to return stuff. So it's like, oh no, so some product manager's decision there or whatever it is. That's interesting. So I think, speaking from, working at a bunch of startups, like a lot of times that we don't have the luxury of time and budget even to do this stuff. So what if I needed, insights quickly, but I had a little budget, like a lot of designers out there, right? Small teams, designer of one. Like, what are some sort of methods that are sort of more accessible to those folks?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I've been there as well myself, and sometimes it can be quite hard to, whether it's budget or time or whatever, it can feel quite hard. And so I guess there's a few things that come to mind. I guess the first thing though is, I think it's really important that you're really clear on what your research goals are. So like, whenever you're running any study, what are you trying to learn? But also, like, what are you going to do with that information when you get it? Because I think sometimes people go, I'm going to run the study, but like, if I get results that aren't helpful, am I actually going to do anything about it? So be really clear on like, what is the, if someone comes back and says they don't like this thing that is like the candidate to go, to go down the line, what are we going to do about that? So like, quite often I think we almost glaze over the key goal in mind. And so be really clear on what you're trying to learn. And then obviously it depends on the kind of problem you're trying to solve, with the area, the information you're trying to learn about. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I think you can spin up tests that are really small and they can be really effective. And so our panel is actually pretty affordable as well. It's like $1 a minute per test. So say you spin up a test that's going to take a couple of minutes for a participant, it'll be $2 per however many panelists you want to recruit, which is actually pretty affordable. Like if you want to test something with like 10, 20 people, like it might only set you back like 60, $80. And that's actually quite a lot of value. And I guess that's the thing, like I mentioned earlier, it's magic as well. And having those numbers to kind of lean on and go, oh, it's not just it's not just my opinion now, it's the collective, like what's the research is showing us this option is better. And so I guess for me, those kind of studies are pretty cost effective. And you pay as you go with panel credits and Lyssna as well. So it's not like you're, having to spend a bunch of money up front and then, get stuck. So I think that's probably the main one. Like it kind of depends on what kind of study you're running. But like the example I gave before, like a preference test, or even just like a design survey, which is essentially a preference test where you show one design. So you kind of show a design and then get people's feedback on it. You can do that even with like a relatively small number, because really all you're doing, especially at the early stage of a project, you might just be looking for like, are there any things I'm missing? Especially if you're a designer of one, like where you don't necessarily have that kind of like collective design team to bounce ideas off or see if you're missing anything. Because you can actually also, like, another thing that's really cool with our panel is you can target other designers. So you can actually go and say, oh, I actually want to speak to 10 other people who work in the UX design product space. And you can ask them questions just to give you feedback on your design. And that's actually a pretty cool way to do it as well. So it's like, I might only need to speak to 5, 10 people, or maybe I want to interview some of them, but you can do that with our panel as well. So like, I don't think it needs to be big in order to be like effective.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and I use Listener for that as well. I was like,
yeah,
okay, I just want to speak to designers about UX Playbook just to see if they understood what I was trying to get across, and that was really helpful, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah, a lot of insights from there. Another question I had is, how do you balance quick and dirty research with
Mm,
more rigorous sort of methods across the life cycle? Because
yeah,
sometimes you just need the right direction, but then the other times you might need to go like way more granular into decisions you're making depending how complex the flow is or whatever.
yeah.
How do you sort of think about quick and dirty research methods versus more rigorous sort of testing methods?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to the last response I gave in terms of, again, being really clear on what you're trying to learn. Like that's the key. Like what is it that you're trying to learn here? And I guess don't forget that can be a team sport. So even if other people aren't going to undertake the research or run the study, run the test or whatever that is, get them aligned on what you're trying to learn. Because that's another pitfall I think sometimes is that people run research and they get to the end and they go, here's the results. And they go, did you ask this? And you go, ugh, I didn't. And then you feel a little bit like, oh, has this gone to waste? So get that whole team involved where you can. And I guess just keep like I said, continue to think about how you can do, keep things simple. And so even though I just mentioned getting the team involved, I have seen pitfalls where sometimes what starts off as like a relatively small study where you're like, okay, we're going to talk to customers and we want to ask them these 5 questions about this topic. I've seen times where like other stakeholders like, well, if we're talking to customers, I want to also ask this thing and this thing. And all of a sudden your 5-question study, survey is 25, 30 questions. It's a whole lot like more expensive to run and time consuming and asking more of your participants and all that kind of stuff. And so you need to find that right balance of like, what is the goal? I keep coming back to that, but like, what is the goal you're trying to learn here? And yes, everyone should be wanting to get involved in research, but actually like this shouldn't be your only chance. Like, I think depends on where you are. I know some organizations do have limited time to talk to customers, but I think a lot of the time you can, do smaller, more repetitive research studies rather than just like one big bang thing and then kind of like try and get all your questions out in one go. I would say, I haven't quite necessarily answered the balance question, but I think the key for me here is, yeah, like try and keep it as simple as you can and just be really clear on that goal. And if you do that, I think you can often get some good wins on the board without having to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, and I think to your point about one big study where you're asking customers
Yeah.
just everything from A to Z, I think a lot of folks probably on the call have experienced where you get that end of year company survey and it's like 100 questions and you're like, oh my god, it just takes an hour to get through it, and nobody, the response rate is like
Yeah.
10% if that. So
Yeah.
don't do that, guys. Don't overwhelm your
Totally.
customers with that kind of stuff because
And actually,
yeah.
if you run studies more often, you do find like it's just like it becomes almost a heartbeat, depending on who your customers are or who you're testing with. Like it's a whole lot more like palatable if it's like, hey, it's literally a 2-minute survey and it's really simple. And if you're doing those more frequently, you now have more of a pulse on like you can ask the same questions like 4 times a year, and you actually get to see trends. And so I'm a big believer, in running small studies more often than just kind of holding out and being like, we've got one big shot coming up a quarter or a year or whatever it is.
Right, exactly. So before we get to the questions, because we have a few coming in, I just want to remind folks that uh, they can get $20 credit by using the code inside look and by scanning this QR code, and to try out Listener for yourself. Recruit some participants, think about the test you want to run, use the template library to spit it up, to give yourself a good head start, and go from there. And it's limited to 100 users. So if you're keen to test out Listener, especially the live website testing feature, which I love, use that, and yeah, $20 credit off. So okay, let's get to some question. So again, guys, drop your questions in the comments, and let me just show this one first. Take this off the screen. Okay, so we had a question here. um, Do you guys have a plan to integrate with AI in the future? If yes, what are the main benefits that you guys can see?
It's a really good question. I think the way the world is moving, it feels like it's inevitable that people need to consider how AI is going to affect, not just the product we're building, but the world around us and how it affects everything. So yeah, we're definitely talking about it, and actually we're thinking about it, literally as we speak. So we're working on a few things at the moment, and I guess for me with AI, it's all about like what's the problem you are solving. Like it's not about like let's chuck some sparkles on a button and call it like value. It's like what are we actually helping people do? And I think the cool thing about research is that it's a very human thing, and it's a craft as well. And I think we're really cautious that we don't want to sort of like assume that a robot, a machine can just like do all of that kind of nuanced like analysis and synthesis that we as humans and trained researchers can do. However, I think there's quite a few tasks that people don't like doing. And so like I gave an example before where it's like going through, say, like this is just like a real example. Like we ran a customer survey at the end of last year. We had about 80 people respond. A lot of the questions were open-ended. So like a lot of open field responses. And just the effort it took for us to go through each of those 80 responses for each question and kind of theme those up, it's super manual, right? It's like a very manual task. And actually, I don't really want to spend time like picking out themes. Like say, for example, you might run a study where it's like, hey, what do you have for breakfast? And people are going to respond and go, I like to, have this kind of cereal, I like toast or whatever. And like using AI, we can probably quite quickly generate you a summary of that. So at least you've got a starting point. We don't ever want to take away the ability for a human to do that work themselves. But I think it's like, if we can just get you a step closer, especially if it's those kind of monotonous, like repetitive tasks that like I don't want to be doing. Like it's not like I signed up to be designer researcher to kind of be doing that kind of manual work. So I think that's a key one. And I guess the other part for me that we've been thinking about, which is I guess just like around when you're creating a study. So I showed some templates before, and we've got good examples there. But when you are writing questions, I think quite often we're left thinking like, oh, is this a good question, or like, am I leading them some way or another? And I think that's probably another way where AI can probably just be there as a kind of like a little guardrail to be like, hey, just so you know, you might be like, writing a question that's leading people one way or another. And so maybe here's a better way to write that question. Again, very much like user led as opposed to a position where like, AI is completely doing the whole thing. Cause I think we want to really celebrate that craft is that research, like that researchers like have. And so I think it's about, enhancing as opposed to necessarily just like replacing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and exactly. To your point, there's a lot of manual things that we do as designers and researchers. So so we don't have to do that and focus on like getting the insight and
Yeah.
kind of get stakeholder buy-in would just be really, really helpful, right? Like, that makes a ton of sense. We have another question here. Thanks for that question. Okay, this was a long one and it's a bit truncated, so I'll read it out here. How do you avoid situations in projects which may have existing assumptions in place that have led to a feature being developed where the research is more about validation instead of
Mm,
discovery?
mm. It's a good question because I think it's tricky. I've been there as well. I don't have the perfect answer here because I think it all depends on like the kind of stakeholder management and relationships you have with those people, right? And so because I've been there where it's kind of like you're doing it almost as a check, just to be like, cool, we just want to validate this is good enough. And I think like I'm not going to answer the question straight away, but I'm going to anecdotally speak to it. I think sometimes as well, like you can manipulate studies. We have bias as humans, right? And we're always going to bring our bias into whether that's like you're trying to angle towards a particular solution. That can happen, and especially if a stakeholder, maybe someone who's not as I guess seasoned in research, really wants to kind of have a say in how it's run. It can be quite tricky because an anecdote like we talked about just the other day in our team was like cool, if we have this button behind a menu, it's going to be harder for people to find. So in theory, if we just put it top level, everyone's going to find it. It's going to be clickable, right? But like, we can't put every single button top level. But if your goal is to make everyone hit the button, then you could just arguably be like, well, we put it on a home screen and now it works. So job done. So I think there is some nuance there. And so I guess it's our role as researchers to really advocate for like best practice here and writing studies that are, aren't biased and are fair. And I guess another scenario, like another way you could respond to that situation might be that if there is kind of like a leading candidate, as a researcher, maybe a good way to do it is suggest like, why don't we always test against like a control or against the baseline or something, so it's like whether that's even just testing against the current state. So it's like, cool, we're building an improvement to this page. Here's the current state. At least it's not just testing one thing and then you're only getting input on this one new solution. So maybe it's that, or maybe if you can spin up something quickly as an alternate, do that. Or another way to do it could be like take a step back and go, okay, well, here's a solution. Why don't we abstract it? So it's like maybe it's take away our brand or make it just wireframe level. And that might be easier for you to come up with a separate solution at a lower fidelity pretty quickly and then test that. So I guess there's a few ways there, but it is quite tricky. And it kind of depends on how much your stakeholders are involved and how you want to do that.
Yeah. And Conrad had a follow-up question. Is there a way to pull stakeholders back in the process if you haven't been able to avoid this situation?
Pulling them back, I guess, like as in pull them out, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess again, it depends. I think you really have to advocate for like the craft of research. As a designer, I do that as well. It's like, hey, this is a space that I specialize in. I got experience here, and so actually like take it almost like kind of the same way that if I'm a designer and I'm getting feedback with someone over my shoulder and we're in Figma, it's kind of like that's not the most useful feedback. So I would say almost like how in terms of pulling them out, maybe it's about like, again, taking it back to those goals. So like rather than let's write the study together or let's create it and Lyssna together, maybe it's more about like, let's align on what we're trying to learn. And again, what are we going to do if it goes wrong? And kind of taking it back up a level to be like, let's talk about it at that level of the wider group. And are we aligned on that? Are we agreed that like we're going to try and learn these 3 things? And if this goes well, what are we going to do with that? And if it goes not so well, what are we going to do with that as well? And I think if you ask those higher level questions at a wider group, maybe you'll get some success, but I guess it depends on the situation. And big organizations can be complex. So I completely empathize for that situation as well.
Okay, so I think we've got time for one final question, and it's from me. Yay! Well, I've been asking all the questions, but just one final one. What's your approach to continuous discovery versus like project-based research? A lot of times we kind of just do the project-based and then we forget about it, move on, especially in this sort of agency world as well, which is the reality of lots. So approach to continuous discovery.
Honestly, we have started more intentional continuous discovery in the past 3 months here at Lyssna, and it has been almost the best thing on my job. Like, because quite often I think as design, I mean, there's place for both for sure. And as designers, I think when we're running these project-based studies, we're normally focused on, very specific things. So we go into these conversations and we might have a quick kind of like, oh, hey, tell us a bit about how you're using Lyssna as a product or how your experiences with this particular problem. But quite quickly you're testing something. You're like, is this new design going to work? Or how do you think about this particular subject? But actually, like for me, the continuous discovery activity is such a good way to take a step back and just like start getting just building that, like, I guess, like overall empathy for your customers, your users. And it's amazing. Like for me, like as a designer, getting to speak to, I'm trying to speak to a customer, like if not once a week, at least once a fortnight. And it's just breathing life into the work I do, because it's not like obviously you go away and you talk to someone and then you action everything they say because it's one person. But actually sometimes there are things we can do. Sometimes you talk to a customer and they're like, I love your product, but oh, there's just this one little thing here where it's like, like this thing here just doesn't render right, or like this button doesn't make sense. And it's like, oh, you're right. And it's like, you can just kind of quickly potentially action that. And that's such a hit as a designer. So yeah, I'm a big believer in it. I think if you have the ability to like talk to customers, and not everyone can, like depending on the organization you work for, the type of work you do, it can be quite hard to get access to customers. But if you are in a position as a designer where you can pretty readily, have conversations with them, then I'd really like challenge you to try, even if it's like once a month, just like send some emails out and be like, hey, I'd love to talk to you. Like, see if you can give them a little something to say thank you. For me, it's like a little 30-minute conversation, and it's really open-ended. It's like, get to know them, what they do, what they like about your product, what don't they like about your product, anything else that comes out of that. And it's really organic, and it can go any which direction. And it's actually amazing. Like in terms of me and my like putting the U in user experience, like that's the key, right? It's like hearing from your customers, hearing from the people you're designing it for. And quite often I think we spend our time talking about all the problems we're trying to solve as designers. It's like, oh, we really need to fix this conversion rate, or we really need to make people hit that button more, or fix this problem. And you're always, because that's what we do, we're problem solvers. But so it's actually quite nice to have conversations where you're hearing not just the problems, you're hearing what people love. And that's also really grounding, and it gives you like an anchor going forward to be like, you know what, like we shouldn't change this because we're getting great feedback on this thing. And you don't always necessarily research to find out what's great. Often you're trying to figure out how to solve problems. And so, yeah, if people aren't doing it and they can, it would be like my number one recommendation going forward is like, if you can talk to a customer, even if it's one, I don't know, a quarter, like just have a conversation with a customer, or tee up, see if someone in your sales team or your marketing team are already having conversations that you can join and just be a fly on the wall. It really just gives me life.
Yeah, I love that, where you said be a fly on the wall in sales conversations or customer service calls. That is like so valuable. And I've seen a lot of companies, and I really appreciate this. A lot of companies have their own little communities where they basically source like feedback and ideas and opinions. And it's like, you as a designer could like jump in and be like, hey guys, what do you think about this? Or like, hey, let's jump on a quick call. So really appreciate that when folks have kind of like, a Discord or a Slack where it's just customers that care about the product and actively want to shape it, because then they're very vocal, and you can, be a therapist for them, but also it help you like, inform decisions based on what you're doing with work. So before we let you go, Andrew, I just want to say thank you. But is there anything you'd like to share with the audience? Any upcoming releases or something you're working on?
I mean, nothing major. Like, obviously, we're going to keep listening out to what people are looking for in the Lyssna platform. So, please do feel free, people, to connect with me, whether that's on LinkedIn or whether you use Lyssna or not. I'd love to hear what people are looking for. We're constantly trying to improve this product and make it really valuable for people who are doing research. So, other than that, I guess I just want to say thanks for the chat and the opportunity. It's been really cool.
Yeah. Likewise. And so let me get you on off stage while I'll just close this up. Thanks again, Andrew, and let's have a quick debrief afterwards. So don't go anywhere. I'll take you off stage, and I'll see you in 5 minutes or so.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. All right, guys, let's do some housekeeping again, just as we quickly wrap up. Again, we want to thank you, the folks at Lyssna. And if you're looking for an easy way to conduct research, we've just showed you the platform. So hopefully it's been exciting for you to sort of test out. Go check out Lyssna. It's completely free to sign up. And Lyssna are helping the audience here to get $20 off their first test. So just scan this QR code and use the code InsideLook20. Only valid for the first 100 users or first 100 people that want to try it. So there's limited spots. So just scan that QR code or click a link somewhere in the chat. You can scroll up and I'll drop a link again after this conversation. And again, it's completely free to try out. So why not try this recruitment feature and get users from all over the world to test your product, or, it could be the landing page of your company, or it could even be something like, hey, what do you think about this portfolio, UX designers, right? It could be something like that, just to try it out for yourself, to see if it's valuable. And then you can then pitch your company and be like, hey, we should try this and do it on a bunch of different things. So, I found it valuable. So hopefully you guys will do too. And just FYI, if you want to get notified for upcoming events, you can scan this QR code and just sign up. And there's just emails about the events that are coming up. So no other, feeds, is just saying, hey, these events coming up. But the next one is on March the 19th, which is next week. We actually have 6 or 7 events in a row, so that's quite fun. Next event, we're talking to Anetta, creator, educator, and portfolio expert. Anetta just spent the last 8 months to work on a new portfolio course. So for anyone looking to work on their portfolio, this is going to be a banger. I'm sure she has so much to share. And you can see by the things that she's posting, she's done a lot of research on this subject. So we're definitely going to deep dive and pick her brain about this. But that's it for today. And yeah, if you like to listen to a conversation like this again, scan this or head to live.uxplaybook.org. So until next time, I'm going to play the intro video, and bye! This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right, boy.
This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right, boy.